Welcome to the commentary booth where we watch and you guessed it, commentate on the week that was in movies and TV. I'm your host and play by play commentator Jam Yaps, and each week I'm joined by a rotating cast of color commentators to help you find your next viewing treat. This week I'm joined by a concert and event producer who lists their favorite movie as Pulp Fiction and favorite TV show as Breaking Bad. Welcome to the show, Alex Bua.
Hey, g'day. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Uh, so a little bit of a different one here. Going to refresh our memory on a kind of a classic movie at this point, even though it's only from the year 2000.
A ballad.
Yep. Yeah, so we're letting our male ego come out and our daily thoughts of the Roman Empire take over as we refresh our
Absolutely.
memory on 2000's Gladiator starring Russell Crowe ahead of the highly anticipated sequel, Gladiator II. Before we dig into it, what is your history with Gladiator and sort of how often do you go back and rewatch this movie?
It's definitely a movie that if it's on TV, I'm stopping to see where it is in the film to see if I need to stop and rewatch this. It's something that I saw in the theaters. I remember very specifically going with my dad. I knew, I feel like I knew of Russell Crowe. And obviously as an Australian, I knew like he was like the big thing, and then Gladiator was like even more of a reason why he was like the coolest Australian thing. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a classic. It's something that I definitely remember as a very positive experience in the movie theaters as a kid.
Yep. Yeah, I remember watching it at home. I don't think I went to the cinema to see it, but I remember just being captivated by it. And then on rewatching it, I was like, my initial thoughts were there's way less actual gladiator action than I remember there being. I thought there was just constant
It's a
gladiator
heavy
fights, and I think
drama.
there's three.
Yeah, yeah. I just recently rewatched it, and like you're right. There's probably three like pivotal like action scenes, and it's other than that, it's like a serious drama. Like it's an emotional roller coaster that like you're rooting for, like not the underdog, but kind of the underdog in Russell. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's more of an emotional roller coaster than I would call it an action movie.
Yep. Yeah, and it's almost like Game of Thrones esque before Game of Thrones was even on anybody's
Oh,
radar.
this is sets the tone for Game of Thrones to exist. Like they've built the bridge for Game of Thrones to walk over. Like a lot of the scenes, how they're shot, a lot of the props, a lot of the things. Like and again, in rewatching it, I like really had to try to watch it under a microscope. Like they did this in 2000 for others to do it in all these other shows. So yeah, it's very much like Ridley Scott, very much like kind of wrote it into existence. This is how you make a movie like this or an action packed movie, but he did it with such a dramatic tone, which is so cool.
Yeah, and the other thing I noted rewatching it over the weekend, this is still like a beautiful movie, still absolutely holds up. Like all of the big, vast action scenes, like the opening war sequence, it's just like the amount of people on screen, the costumes, and then like as it just goes on, like the recreation of Rome, where there is some CGI stuff, but
Very
it doesn't
little.
look like it's from 2000. Like
Yeah.
it all looks amazing.
Yeah, it's very good to think that again in 2024 to put this movie up against anything else, like you wouldn't be able to tell like that's fake, this is fake. Like there's a few tells, especially in the fight scene with the tigers. That's like the only thing that's like okay, like they cut some corners here, but for the time and the place that it was, it's still cut very well. But yeah, like how they show Rome with showing the vastness of it. The Colosseum obviously is its crown jewel, and that's the one thing that they go so hard on getting the detail right. But yeah, like you mentioned earlier, Game of Thrones in almost all of the scenes with the Colosseum like venues that I forget what's going on. Like the son of the harpy chases Daenerys and the dragon comes in and all that stuff is like taken exactly from Gladiator. Star Wars does it in Attack of the Clones. They have this like Roman Colosseum scene, and yeah, like again, this is like the OG showing it like in its prime in the best way. I think to this day is probably translated to film.
Yep. Yeah, and you mentioned that tiger scene. I thought even like if you put that scene up against some of the Marvel movies that we see today, I don't think you could say, "Oh, that's the one from 2000."
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It definitely would be like, oh yeah, that was made in 2018 or something. Like, yeah, it's very, very well done. And the soundtrack too. I mean, that's something I like. It's scored so well, and the soundtrack still stands up today. So yeah, it's a very strong movie from start to finish.
Yep. Yeah, and I was reading about that tiger scene. They apparently used real tigers for that tiger scene as well. It's
I did
not
not
like
know that. I
they're
I
not
feel like
purely CG. I thought there's definitely some CG elements in there for the tigers, but they actually used real tigers. I was like, "Okay."
interesting. Well,
Uh,
hey, props to the editing team. They did a great job cutting it.
yeah, I'm just trying to find I did write it down somewhere. But yeah, they used like 5 real tigers or something in the yeah, so they used 5 tigers, and there was a vet on scene with a tranquilizer gun. Uh, and for safety's sake, Russell Crowe was not allowed to be within 15 feet of the tigers, but other than that, there was tigers literally on that set.
That makes sense. I know Russell's had a few close calls with some wildlife and some nature. So I feel like that's very much like in Russell's wheelhouse. I don't know if you've seen the interview. I believe he talks about a very interesting interaction he had with the spider that he had like on one of his like indie films earlier. I don't want to like steal the thunder and I don't want to get it wrong, but I think it's like a Graham Norton interview that he brings it up. But he had a scene with a spider that was like required to like crawl up him and like on his face, and they couldn't get the spider to like move up on his face, and eventually when it did, it like settled somewhere on his neck, and they didn't get the scene that they wanted to, so they had to keep doing it, and then it turned out that like the spider at some point like actually bit him and he broke out in hives and like was
Oh,
basically
Jesus.
like stung by the spider, or he was either stung by the spider or the spider may have made a move on Russell and put like eggs on him or something. I forget how it ended, but he just was very much like, I don't like working with animals if I
I was
don't
gonna
have to
say,
work with
I'm not sure
animals.
which one of those is worse.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But yeah, I just remember it being a very weird interaction with spiders, and this seems like the reasoning why he wouldn't want to be around wildlife for future films.
Yeah, and also in this one, in the opening scene where he's riding the horse through like the bush and like the forest, apparently there's a point where the horse got startled and backed him up into like the trees. So
Oh,
later, when he's talking to Maximus Aurelius about, I'm going to let you take over, he's got a cut on his face and it's like got stitches in it, and it's like a legitimate cut and stitches from filming previously.
wow, interesting. I'd have to rewatch that and try to catch that scene to see if at any point they like cut him post the cut, and then they could use the scene with the cut, or it's just like, screw it, we got to move forward with this stitches regardless.
Well, that's another interesting tidbit about this movie. It was filmed in order, so they
Oh
actually
wow.
filmed unusually this whole movie in chronological order. They didn't do bits and pieces as they went, which is crazy. Like
I
that's
mean,
so
yeah,
unusual in
that's nuts.
cinema.
That's nuts. And again, to draw back to a favorite TV show of mine, that's how Breaking Bad was too. Like the actors were filming it like as, or they were given the scripts as like the episodes are dropping. So like as an actor, to like do the scene as the scene is being dictated to you, and to not know that like you might actually
Mm.
be lying about screaming to your wife that you didn't do whatever, but you did. So yeah, it's very interesting, and in a way, it kind of, I feel like it gets the best out of a lot of actors because they're just taking it from the page and allowing the director to kind of like push them to exactly what the director wants without like thespinizing it too much, and like, if I do this and attack it like this, then it would be like this. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably a better way to do it. Like if you're trying to have these sort of reveals later down the line, yeah, if this actor knows, they're going to ham it up a little bit earlier on, and then it might be a bit more obvious to the audience watching.
Exactly. Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, because this movie is based on true historical facts, how big of a sort of Roman history buff are you?
I mean, I definitely I went to an all boys private prep school in high school, so anything history that had anything to do with Roman Empire, Greek mythology, kind of like the conquering of like all that stuff, like was definitely interesting and piqued my interest. But I wouldn't say that Gladiator was like the reason why. But it definitely, again, it's like it's perceived to be this like Roman Empire masculine thing. But I definitely think as a kid, I definitely saw it as what it was. Like it's cool. Like I didn't understand the drama the first time watching it, definitely, but like as it grew on me and as I grew, I understood it. Um, but I think my passion for the film, and I guess even drives my passion towards like mythology and all stuff like that, was just like how it was filmed and how it had everything to do with like actual history, and it wasn't this like fake thing that you're just trying to make Hollywood like money. Like I wouldn't say that I watched Gladiator and then like picked up history books to like see tit for tat how they do, but it definitely like edged me towards opening up more and questioning and diving into like future things like that, because it was really cool to like read history and then have a little bit of a awesome visual aid to go along with it. So that
Mhm.
was probably the best like connection for me.
Yep. Yeah, I did ancient history at in high school, and, like, the Roman Empire and Sparta and all of that was definitely the most interesting era for me to cover, and, yeah, I think this movie, again, like, yeah, I didn't I have watching it the first time, just like, "Yeah, it's a cool story, there's some cool action sequences," but rewatching it over the weekend, I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's an actual historical figure, that's an actual historical figure," and all
Yeah,
very accurate. Like, even the way that the Colosseum is portrayed with all of the, like, hidden trapdoors and, like, the underbelly part and the guys that, like, run it and recreate battles and stuff, it's all so accurate to
yeah,
how
exactly.
the
And like
Colosseum
it's
ran.
almost and it's been emphasized most recently with the show on Amazon Prime that's out, which they kind of like took the original Gladiator movie and made it into a series, and now there's like a second season and they can spin off of it, which is like I've watched that show, it's fantastic. But yeah, I feel like they've kind of played with the real history, but then kind of like made it their own story, which is great. Um, but yeah, man, it's definitely like a keen interest to know like there's actual history behind it, and yeah, it's very strong, very strong.
Is that the, Those Who Are About to Die show? Is that the one you're
That
referencing?
that's it. I didn't want to murder the name, but that's the one, and that's probably. I feel like they just took the film Gladiator and very much like made it more of a drama and did it across like a few episodes. I think it's like 10 episodes. A great watch. Highly recommend it. It definitely
Mhm.
will feed. It'll feed into all any and all of your Gladiator wants and dreams. Oh, but the thing I was just thinking of and I forgot, but yeah, when I did do the history on the Colosseum specifically and all of its like possibilities and like Gladiator was probably, like I said, it was like the only visual aid that, like, as a kid, you could watch to be like, that's the Colosseum, and like tigers fought humans and humans killed humans and whatever. But then, like, doing my due diligence as a student and finding out that, like, oh, like, they did all of these, they dramatized all these actual historical battles to the Roman people, like when they're talking about like the Battle of Carthage and like this and that, and like I thought these people were supposed to be these people. Like sometimes it went to the script, like they were selling to the crowd. Sometimes it didn't, and that was just kind of like what again the Roman event producers, like I am currently, kind of had to roll with. Like I go around and I manage talent and shows at clubs and stuff like that, but they're managing people killing people in front of hundreds of thousands of people, so it's very different, but still kind of the same. But then finding out like that it wasn't just like these like amazing land battles with like exotic creatures, like we're gonna see in the second one, they flood the Colosseum. And I
Yep.
will never forget finding out that like my history teacher was like, "Yeah, they used to flood the Colosseum." And I remember like someone in the class being like, "What do you mean? Like they brought water in?" He's like, "They flooded it. There's boats. They brought in alligators. Like everything that you can imagine in a like battle happens in the Colosseum." And knowing that that was like actually happening in history, but Gladiator didn't give us that. Now knowing that the sequel has this like flooded Coliseum scene, when I saw that, I was like, oh my god, like we're getting exactly what we wanted as kids, like more of the depth and the possibilities that this thing from hundreds of thousands of years ago was used to entertain human beings. Like it's insane.
Yeah, that's the coolest part about this, because this original one, like we said, only has those sort of 3 in Colosseum
Scenes.
gladiator battles. They have so much that they can draw on for this sequel, which is crazy that it's taken 24 years for there to be a sequel, given how
Yeah,
much money
yeah.
this movie made.
Yeah, and given how the Hollywood machine is, and that like if something's successful once, a year later, let's make a sequel. But in the early 2000s, they weren't on that tip yet, so here we are, 24 years later. But yeah, it's good. I'm very excited. I'm happy that everything I've seen and kind of like read into the speculation seems to be being delivered and exciting for the sequel. But again, here we are talking about the first one 24 years later, and I still feel just as giddy as a kid now that I do, then. It's such a good film. It still stands up.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, so the budget, $103 million. The lifetime earnings so far, $465.4 million. They'll probably tack on a nice little bump on that when they do some re-releases and stuff in the next couple of months. And then
Absolutely.
I'm I can't wait to see how much Gladiator 2 earns because it's one of those ones that I think everybody's going to want to go and see.
Exactly, and it's the type of thing that, like, as a 30-something-year-old adult, like, I wanna see it, and I also feel like it could speak to the current modern age 12-year-old. Like, it has a very wide range of viewers that it's gonna get just based on its, like, look. If you don't know anything about the film, it should be appealing. But then, yeah, for the large amount of people that have seen the original film and, like, paid to see it, this one, it should feed all of us the way that we wanna see a sequel. So, yeah, this is the one that I knew I didn't think they could mess up this sequel. And for all signs, it doesn't look like they have. But yeah, I'm very very eager to see this one. When I heard about it, I was like, please be true. Like, please don't just be some
Mhm.
hot air that I've been fed. Like, very much need this movie to be made.
And like they've gone all out on the casting as well. Like Paul Mescal, um, Denzel Washington, uh,
Pedro.
Pedro. Yeah, like they didn't skimp on
Yeah.
anything for this, and then yeah, I'm expecting it to be
No,
massive.
I mean the most recent film I really enjoyed of Denzel's was his Apple movie, Macbeth, and that was like really, really like deep Denzel, like perfect for the role. So to see that, like, him act in Macbeth, and now knowing that he's portraying this new character in Gladiator and everything that I've kind of seen and everything that's been speculating about his performance in this one, it seems like they've gotten the perfect out of Denzel. They've gotten exactly what they wanted in Denzel, and like probably and more than likely an Academy Award winning movie role.
Yep. So then, if we look back at the cast of the original Gladiator, Russell Crowe as Maximus Decimus, Joaquin Phoenix as uh, Commodus, who else? Jimon Honshu as Juba, Richard Harris as Marcus Aurelius, Tommy Flanagan, who at the time I had no idea who he was. Now I watch and go, oh, that's the guy from Sons of Anarchy.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's Chibs. Or yeah, it's Chibs. Yeah.
Yep. That's always the fun part of going back and watching some of these older movies. You go, oh, I know that guy now. I know who that is now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, oh my God, that's that dude is a 12-year-old. And then like 10 years later, he's like a feature in something. Yeah. What's the actor's name that is the African American slave that he's with that like helps that like chews up the thing and puts it in his scar? He's another one that's in like a million other
Uh,
films.
yeah, that's
Um,
Jimon Honshu. He's in like the Quiet Place
Everything.
movies. He's in a
Yeah,
bunch of
he's a
movies. Yeah.
legend, and yeah, and like again, such a small role but very impactful. Yeah, Chibs from Sons of Anarchy, and then I'm drawing a blank on what other things he's in. This is crazy. The big like hunk of a guy that's in like Russell Crowe's like battalion, like the
Mhm.
biggest dude of them all. That guy's in like he's in Beer Fest. He's like one of the Germans, I think, in Beer Fest. I know, I don't have to look
Of
this up,
course.
and I apologize if I'm wrong. But like, I'm pretty sure he's like one of like the obnoxiously large Germans that like tries to win over Beer Fest in that rom com with the Broken Island guys. Or not rom com, that comedy with the Broken Island guys. So like, yeah, like there's a lot of people in this film that if you've seen other things, you're like, holy crap, that's so and so from Gladiator. Like, what?
Yep. Yeah, it's awesome. And yeah, I think the two leads, Russell Crowe and Joaquin Phoenix, they both absolutely crushed their performances in this. And um, I think this is Joaquin's best emperor portrayal. His Napoleon one is good, but a bit strange.
It's just too French. It's just too French. Like it's another one that I've only seen drips and drabs of it, so I don't mean to judge it by all that I've seen. But yeah, I was kind of like, this is like a lot, like too much even.
And yeah, we mentioned sort of the historical accuracy. I did read that Ridley Scott hired several historians to make sure that this was very accurate, and I hope they continue that in the next one. There are a few inaccuracies though. So
Hmm.
the first one being Marcus Aurelius was not murdered by Commodus, which I guess that's totally fine. Like that's serves the story and gets it moving to the next point.
Yeah.
It's believed that he
Uh-huh.
actually died from a smallpox or measles outbreak.
Hmm.
And then,
Interesting.
although Commodus did engage in show combat in the Colosseum, he was not killed in the arena. He was actually strangled to death by a person called Narcissus, um, who is that was the name that Russell Crowe's character was originally going to use, and then they felt that because it was too factually accurate to then go and change how the ending plays out, it's too obvious, so they just made up a new character for Russell.
Yeah. The pilot tested it and they're like, that name doesn't work. We gotta get something better. More Roman. More Roman.
Yeah, and Maximus is a much more like manly, powerful name that's like people
Strong,
will connect.
strong name. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And then, yeah, so the last couple, in reality, the death of Commodus did not result in peace for Rome. It actually sparred a chaotic period where they had 5 emperors in 1 year.
Hmm.
And um, some of the helmets in that opening battle scene are not accurate to the time that the movie is set in. They're actually helmets worn by legionnaires from quite a period earlier.
Oh, so they were what they were trying to okay, so yeah, they like they didn't bring it up to speed fully. They were actually too far back with the helmets. Interesting.
Yep. And then the catapults and the ballista that were used in that battle sequence, they would normally only be reserved for a siege of a city, not actually open combat like that, which is fine.
I
And
do remember that one
there's no
getting brought up. But
documentation
yeah,
of flaming arrows and catapults and stuff as well.
I do remember hearing that about that scene, and that some of the things that kind of like they wanted to be historically accurate as possible, but they're like, okay, we got to get big and bold on something, so let's just bring
Something's
it
got to
in
be
here. But
cool.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Like, but still, like for the perfectionist, like I get it, it's good, but like it's still translated very very well on film.
And I think, I'm not sure if I'm 100% right, but it looked like they reused one particular shot where one of those like oil jugs that's on fire crashes into a tree and explodes. I'm pretty sure they used that same shot twice. Like they used it in one spot and then a bit more of the battle happens and then they use it again.
And
I was
again,
like, I was like,
they got me.
but yeah, other than that, awesome. Like just the vastness of that battle, the amount of extras that they had to cast for this, and awesome. I wasn't a big fan of like the slow mo that was used pretty liberally. There's a couple of times where it works, but a lot of the times it's like, oh, it seems unnecessary. Like we're overusing this a little bit, Ridley.
Yeah, yeah, but again, it's like if you think back to like what special effect on film was like the new thing that like everyone's pushing, like if slow mo was that, and I don't know if it was like they just hammered it because it was like the hot new thing. But yeah, I'd agree. Like again, if you're being like super critical, if they had too much slow mo in the film, it's like okay, you're gonna need to correct me here. Which came first, Gladiator or The Matrix?
The Matrix, I think. Just
Okay, so it's like if they were trying to like, yeah, The Matrix came out late 90s. I think you're right. So yeah, if like Gladiator was like trying to like take what The Matrix did and like expand on it, then like well played. But yeah, it's very interesting that that's like kind of the only thing that they just like hammered repetitively with effects.
yeah, yeah. I didn't mind. Like there was a couple of moments I was like, okay, that's this battle's taking a long time because we're constantly in slow mo. It's like oh, what's his name? The the guy that did the Justice League, the Snyder Cut,
Oh yeah,
where it's just like
yeah.
constant slow mo. I'm like,
Extended for
okay,
no, yeah, extended
we
for no
don't need
reason other than slow mos. Yeah,
yeah, we don't need
yeah.
a scene that should be a minute to take 3 minutes because it's in slow motion.
No, thank you. No, sir.
Trying to just see what else I wrote down.
I was gonna say some of the things that I remember, and like again, like Gladiator the film is great, but I feel like there's a lot of like pop culture relevance behind Gladiator. Like obviously Jay-Z's the cut of like the I think it's off the Blue album, and it's at the Are You Not Entertained intro is like legendary in the hip hop world. And then as again working music festivals and events, the amount of times I've heard that sampled at the right time and sometimes at the wrong time, but yeah, that like knowing that like if you know the scene, like if the person's playing this, there's got to be some sort of like this is like a moment. But yeah, that one's like really really strong. I'm pretty sure Kanye has played with that sample as well. So obviously, like two huge moguls in hip hop have taken directly from the film. But yeah, like even recently, Russell Crowe's use in the MCU playing Zeus was kind of like a joke on like his heyday as Gladiator. Like somehow we're gonna bring in this like historical figure and screw it, we'll use Russell Crowe as playing Zeus and Thor. Like that was kind of like again a little bit of not a direct line but a dotted line to Gladiator. So yeah, it's again it's like something that stands up, and there's so many like pulls from the film that are used. Like I think I'd go lying. Like obviously George R. R. Martin wrote Game of Thrones the way that he wanted, but how they brought it to life on TV. Like I'm gonna murder the directors and writers' names, but I know they had to have at some point taken like reference and knowledge from almost all the scenes that we're talking through here in the Gladiator, and them only being a few action scenes. Like there is no like tit for tat battle of the bastards like setup, but at the same time like you watch the Russell Crowe like sword play, the clashing of everything in the original battle scene, like so many things that's been taken from like the Gladiators and even further back like Braveheart and like all of these like action thrillers. Like everyone's always taking from what they've loved and just like redoing it the way they want. And I feel like Gladiator fits in for so many of those examples.
Yep. The other thing I had of a note too was this is a much less like gory in your face movie than I think a lot of people remember it to be. Like there are a couple of moments later on where we see like Maximus decapitate a guy with two swords. But in that first battle, all of the deaths are kind of hidden. Like it's a lot of implied violence where you'll see him like swing a sword, but then the camera's behind the tree, so you just kind of get the idea that he's cut someone in half and they stab
Yeah,
someone, but they don't actually show it. But then towards the end of the movie, they start to show some of that to like really amp it up and like really hit you hard with, oh, geez, this is really violent now.
yeah, like the Are You Not Entertained scene is the perfect one. Like that's actually like the first one I agree where there's like actually violence on film. Like he slashes this guy and then there's like you see the blood spurt and then he stabs the guy and like you said, it's like you go that he's about to get him, but then it cuts to another angle and it's like that's done. And yeah, when he takes the sword out of the guy that he stabbed twice and then does this double sworded move, it's like a very quick cut and then there's a head on the ground and like that's it. Whereas like if you were to do this in a Tarantino film, you're going to get everything exactly the way that he thinks it is and then insert over the top obnoxious on top of it. So like yeah, they very much like kept it historical, but then like it's not like they're trying to make it a PG movie, but like it is in a way like cinematically appropriate for someone that doesn't need all of the gore that they could essentially see in this type of film. Like even thinking about like The Patriot, which is another like older early 2000s late 90s film that has a lot of action in it, like in The Patriot with Russell Crowe, or yeah, no, with Mel Gibson, excuse me. Like there's scenes where there's a cannon and like it goes through a crowd of the soldiers and like you're gonna see multiple legs go and like you're seeing it. Whereas like in these battles, like yeah, like when the lady falls off the horse carriage and she like puts her hands up and then it like slices her in half. Like again, it's like this quick cut. You know what's happening, but you don't like see it happening. And then there's two halves of a body on the ground. It's very like in out. We get the point
Yeah, they
where
don't
they
like
could have
linger
done
on
it
it.
exactly, exactly, exactly. Which is good because I feel like it helps to a broader audience. So I'm very curious, like if they're staying with the same tones as the first one and the second one, like I applaud them. Like they don't need to make it the most gory, like over the top thing. They just kind of need to stay in the realm of Gladiator and give us what we want.
Yep. Yeah, and I think the way they've done it in this movie, like, it works really well because it does give you that ramp up moment where when it does finally happen, it's much more impactful than if in that opening war sequence we'd seen guys getting taken out by those big flaming jugs and like exploding and stuff like that. And like you think of Napoleon, like in the opening scene, we see a horse get absolutely obliterated by a cannonball. We don't sort of get that in this. It's implied violence, implied violence, implied violence. Then a lady gets hit with a spear in the Colosseum, and then a guy gets his head cut off, and you're like, oh, well, okay. Now I'm locked
Yeah.
in on, okay, we're in the Colosseum. It gets brutal in here.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the emphasis on like the hand to hand being like the most deadly of it is good because it's like a steady climb towards like the climax of what it is rather than like out of the gate the most like ridiculous violence and then like comes down. So yeah, you're right. They did it very well, and it's almost like they thought of it that way.
Yep.
Are you a trading card collector or a fan of Australian pro wrestling? If so, you're not going to want to miss out on the limited edition Australian wrestling cards. Each set includes 50 packs of 10 cards, including some of the country's top wrestling talents like Robbie Eagles, Shane Haste, Madison Eagles, Hartley Jackson, and they have Shaza McKenzie listed, although she is not a favorite. The velocities, and a lot more. There's wrestlers, referees, announcers, commentators that are featured, giving you a full appreciation of the Australian independent scene. The cards sold out a lot faster because cards are hot right now, as I'm sure Jeremy Lambert will tell you. But you can order your Australian wrestling cards now at Pario Magazine. That's PARIO magazine.com.au/AUS WRES cards. Follow Australian Wrestling Cards on social media at AusResCards for updates. Join the hundreds of fans who have already discovered the excitement of Australian wrestling cards.
One of the other interesting facts I wrote down is in that opening scene when Maximus is talking to Marcus Aurelius and recalling his kitchen homestead and like how he wants to retire and go home to his family. That wasn't actually in the script. They didn't like give Russell a description of what the kitchen, how to describe the kitchen. He's describing his actual family home from childhood in Australia in that scene.
Oh, that makes sense. That totally makes sense because it's such like a memorable thing, and it's again, it's another thing that I've seen recently re-pop up in my social thread, and like if there's like a meme or something, a video out there of like a guy driving down like a country road, and he's like, "Oh my god!" and the lady's like, "What are you freaking out about?" and he gets out of the car and reenacts the scene where he's got his hands over the corn and everything, and just like walks off with the song playing. So yeah, it's such like it is a perfect description of a perfect eternity to like look forward to. Like again, if that was written on the page, like that's good. But it's so cool to know that Russell just like plucked it from like if I were to describe my perfect, it's what I know is perfect and just ran with it. So yeah, it's again, it just proves that how awesome this like film has so many intricacies and how like real it continues to stay.
And for Ridley Scott to let him like just continue with that, like he's drawing from personal experience. There's heart and soul in what he's delivering. Just let him go with it. If it ends up
Yeah,
we don't end up
ad lib,
using it,
ad
it's
lib.
fine. But let's get it on tape first, and then we'll look at it later.
Totally, absolutely.
Uh, and then I noticed one mistake in this movie as well. That's like subtle, but if you know he's saying red and yellow kill a fellow, red and black venom lack, or a snake, the snake that they
Uh huh.
use is the non-venomous snake, which makes
That's what I
sense if they're
thought.
putting it in bed with a person.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because yeah, so what you're saying is in the film, how they describe it is the reverse.
So yeah, they show like a snake being put into the bed of one of the senators, and
Yeah, 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 yeah.
it's the snake where the red touches the black, which
Yep.
means that it has no venom. But if red
Yeah,
touches
because it's
yellow,
red.
it's venomous.
Yeah, it's red and black is a friend of Jack. Red and yellow kill a fellow. I remember
Yep.
learning that as like a Boy Scout. So yeah, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, yeah, call it a mistake or call it like the one way of them being cheeky to be like, gotcha. But yeah, I mean, like I remember being taught that as a kid, and it didn't at all come to my attention when I rewatched it. But that's interesting.
Yep.
It's like why did they do that purposely to be cheeky, or they just like didn't even pick it up? which
It was.
I feel like they would
I
have
would
to have picked
imagine.
up.
I would imagine it was the insurance company being like, "Don't use the highly venomous snake. Just use the one that looks exactly like it. That 99% of people aren't gonna even realize."
Yeah, exactly. Like
Like,
Ridley, like if you want to cut the corner and use a computer fake poisonous snake, go for it. But if you're gonna use a real one, let's use a non-poisonous one. How about that?
and it still looks like a deadly snake. Like it. That's why they get so often confused because they both look like they could kill you straight up.
Oh yeah, mate. If as much as I'm gonna sit here and say I remember that nursery rhyme of what is and is not a poisonous snake, when you see a snake, that's the last thing that's coming to my mind. Like, oh, which one is it? Red and black or red and yellow? Like, it's just a snake. Like, no
Yeah,
thanks. I'm all
yeah.
good.
If I see a red, black, and yellow snake, I'm like, no. Yeah.
Nope.
You
Nope.
stay over there.
Mm-mm.
I'll stay
No,
over here.
thank you. Exactly.
Um, and there was a couple of sound effects in the hand-to-hand combat, like the punching and kicking sound. They were a little bit cartoony for me. They kind of felt like old school Batman with the punch kick sound.
Yeah, fair. Again, I feel like that is our 2024 ears
Yep.
telling us that like what we're rewatching as in 2000 is like I've heard this sound 100 times used in 100 other battle scenes or fight scenes. But yeah, I mean, again, I agree. Like you're not wrong. There's definitely a little bit of like okay, but at the same time, like if you were to transport yourself back then, like everything how they did it was like not first of its time, but felt like it was pushing every single boundary they could.
Yep. Which gets me even more excited for this next one. Like if they were pushing the boundaries and breaking new ground with the original in 2000, I can't wait to see what they do in Gladiator 2 now with bigger budgets, bigger everything, better technology for everything. Like I think this is going to be an absolutely stunning movie.
Yeah, not to take time away from the OG, but like, have you dive into what they're telling us about the second one, or are you kind of approaching this one like I just want to take it as is and go in and as a pure uneducated movie viewer and just like take this on the chin, raw dog it,
I know I watched the first trailer that they put out, like the not like the full length one, like the sort of like minute
teaser.
teaser trailer thing. I was like, okay, that's enough. You've sold me. And I have read that the story focuses on the kid. Is it Lucius?
Yep.
So I know it
Yeah.
follows him. So that's as much as I know. I'm like, you sold me on the trailer. That's enough. I don't need any more.
No, I'm kind of in the same boat. Like I remember it being confirmed and seeing the artwork and being like, okay, this is fucking awesome. Like this is gonna be great. And then seeing the teaser and almost like getting like that first like blurb about like Ridley Scott's going back to his classic and like da da da, and then like the paragraph on it. And I very much tried to like avoid reading into anything else. But just seeing what I've seen, like there seems to be, like you said, they're emphasizing on like one of the original cast characters, which is great. They're continuing to kind of like not make it only about Rome and like the Colosseum and giving
Mhm.
us like outside of the Colosseum and like the minor leagues of the Colosseum. This is what's happening before they get promoted to the big show and kind of giving us more of how that actually was. They emphasize it in the first film, but I feel like we're going to get a little bit more about like before you get to the Colosseum, this is what you have to deal with. And I feel like maybe Denzel's connected to that aura of what's going on, and then Denzel seems to be then part of what's going on towards the big show in the Coliseum, and then yeah, like Pedro's some sort of war hero that then has to like come in and take part against the main character, and like yeah, like I've just tried to like allow the 60 seconds that I've seen and overanalyze everything, and again, I think that we have twin or brother emperors or something, or it seems like there's
Yep.
a brother brother situation going on, which I know has happened in Roman history. So yeah, like I've just tried to take 60 seconds and overanalyze every second of it, and then go into this film with just I think this is going to happen. I think that's going to happen, and then hopefully just be blown away and wrong on everything.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's the trailer that I got the impression it's doing very similar to what this original movie did, where it's pushing that action inside the Colosseum gladiator stuff at the front of this is what'll get people in. But then I think the actual story is going to be much more of this sort of political intrigue and espionage stuff happening under the surface. What's happening before we even get in there will be the main hook of the movie.
Fingers crossed. I'm in the same boat. I want it. I very much want to be. I don't think surprised is the right word, but I want to walk away being like, didn't see that coming. Like,
Yep.
that was so much better than what I thought.
The interesting thing for me too is this movie going to get more award wins than the original? So the original got 5 Academy Awards, 2 Golden Globes, and a BAFTA, and then has since been listed as number 39 on Empire's list of 100 best movies of all time. So it'll be interesting to see where Gladiator 2
Ranks.
comes in on that list, and can it get more than 8 major motion picture awards?
Did you do? Okay, so if you have the facts in front of you, which actors won awards, and then did Ridley win director, and did Hans Zimmer win for score? Because I feel like those two would have probably been a shoo-in.
So it got at the Academy Awards, it got Best Picture. Russell Crowe
Yeah.
got Best Actor,
Okay.
Best Visual Effects, Best
Okay.
Sound, and
Yep.
Best Costume Design. And yeah, the costumes are phenomenal.
Totally. Yeah. It all
And
makes sense.
then
And again, I'd have to look at like what other movies were up that year to like, okay, like this against that, this against that. But yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, at the Golden Globes, it got Best Motion Picture Drama, Best Original Score, and then the BAFTA it got Best Film. So
Okay.
not as many
And it's a
acting awards and stuff, but
and it's a Hans Zimmer score, right?
I believe so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it was like
Like,
him, and I think there were 2 or 3 collaborators, and
yeah.
for some weird like technicality reason, the collaborators weren't nominated, so it was like just him that got awarded the award,
Okay.
which they've since changed the rules for that. So that if
Yeah.
people
And
are
then like, hold on a
collaborating, they
second.
all get the award.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they riddle off like 30 names. Yeah, I'm trying to see if I can pull it up really quick. But I feel like it was one of his like iconic films with the soundtrack. Like the Enya song at the end. Like I've heard that song so many times, and almost every time that that song has been played by a friend, they're immediately referencing Gladiator. Like the only reason why they're playing the song is to like pretend like they're in the field with the corn and like just bring us back to that moment. So yeah, such an iconic score.
Do you think we'll get any sort of big, sort of major songs like that in this new one?
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, that's the thing is like they can go one of two ways about it. Like Hans can go and like make it more about like epic moments and build the scenes through sound and like an orchestra, which I feel like we will get. But then they could, unfortunately, being 2024, they could go the like super duper corporate route and have some like Charlie XCX track in it that they think like fits in. I don't think they will, but like I don't think they're gonna play like "We Will Rock You" by like the Queen by like Queen, you know.
Yep.
But like they
Yeah, don't go
could,
the
they
Marvel
could.
route.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm saying. I'm 90% sure that they'll go more of like the cinematic sound rather than like top 40 hit. But I don't know if they were to go that route. I'd hope it would be like a very modern rock song, or it's probably going to be like Jay-Z. Like I could see it being more of like a thank you, and they use like a Jay-Z track as like a really powerful track. So yeah, who knows?
Yep.
Especially with Denzel, I feel like Denzel is going to be involved if it's that type of track.
Yeah, Denzel's like introduction scene might have some sort of hip hop beat underneath
Yeah,
it.
just doom doom doom. Like it'd be so sick.
So yeah, I think we've gushed about Gladiator plenty. We'll be interested to see the sequel very soon. In terms of a rating, what would you give the original Gladiator out of 5?
Out of 5, oh, I'll give it a 4.5. I don't think it's perfect, but it's definitely in like the top tier of films. I would definitely say it falls. I'm a huge movie buff, and I don't mean to like knock it, but I'd say it definitely fits in my like top 15, top 10, for me. So yeah, 4.5. I'll stand by that ranking.
Yep. Yeah, I gave it a 5 just because I think it's one of those ones that you just have to watch. Like if you haven't seen Gladiator, it's a bit weird.
Yeah.
Someone
Like
says,
what's
"I've never
wrong
seen
with
Gladiator."
you?
Like, what?
Whoa, sit down. Do you have 2 hours? Do you have 2 hours of time? We're gonna make 2 hours of time. We're gonna watch Gladiator.
It is quite long. It's like 2 hours and 20 minutes or something, and I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah." I knew it was
And
an
it, and
epic.
it's
I didn't
and
realize it
again,
was quite that long, but it doesn't feel that long.
yeah, and it's saying everything that we've said, like from the outsider's perspective, from a I haven't seen Gladiator viewer, they would probably tell you it's probably a lot of action and like gore and like swords and everything. But then they'd sit down and watch and be like, oh my god, that was actually way more dramatic and like plot driven than it was cling cling clang with swords. So it does in a way like it might not seem like it's 2 hours, 2.5 hours. I don't know the running time of it off the top of my head, but it feels long because it is, it's a lot to sink in. It's not just clang, clang, clang. This guy's dead. Good guy wins.
Yep. Alrighty. Thank you everyone for listening to the commentary booth. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe on podcast services and on YouTube. You can follow me on social media at JamieUps Media and at Pario Magazine. Alex, thank you again for taking the time to chat with me. Where is the best place for people to check you out and support all of your creative endeavors?
You guys can look me up on Instagram. My tag is Sideshow Bua. I'm a fan of The Simpsons, so there you go. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Alrighty, and we'll catch you down the road.
Absolutely. Cheers. Thanks, man.
The Commentary Booth is a fan-funded production of JamieUps Media. You can support the podcast alongside our magazine, Pario Magazine, on Patreon at patreon.com/JamieUps Media. The following people supported at the publisher level or higher, and you cannot fathom how incredibly appreciative we are for their support.